thank you for joining us this morning, and on behalf of the Lichfield and Tamworth Chambers of Commerce and the whole Greater Birmingham Chambers of Commerce group, welcome to this Q&A on this damp, dark morning. Doesn't feel very much like August, does it? But it's a good reason to be staying inside and joining us for what's hopefully going to be a really informative session here. And thank you for confirming that, Anne, that you can hear us. That's good news. So yes, today and this morning we've got really sort of two for the price of one, I'm delighted to say. And we're joined by Doug Pullen, the leader of Lichfield District Council, and also Daniel Cook, the leader of Tamworth Borough Council. So both councils work really closely with our chamber group, I'm pleased to say. We built up a really good relationship in recent years, and obviously at times such as those that we're in with the whole coronavirus situation, I think being able to build on or lean on those sort of long-standing relationships as we all sort of pull together to try to come through in the best possible shape is massively important, and sort of shows the values of relationships. So the format today, what we're going to do is going to hear from both leaders shortly, and then we'll sort of throw it open to a Q&A and hopefully just let the conversation flow. So if you want to pop any questions that you sort of spring to mind as we go in the chat room, then what I'll endeavour to do is to pick those up and make sure that we get through as many as we possibly can during this session. If for whatever reason we run out of time, then I'm sure sort of Doug and Danny would be happy to pick those up offline as well. So don't worry about that. But please do keep the questions coming, and we'll look to get into those. And I promise I'll get us finished and away by about 8:55, should we say? So that way we can all have a quick stretch of the legs, cup of tea, and get ready for the next Zoom or whatever we're doing next. But so what we thought we'd do is just to start over in Lichfield and start with Doug. And I mean, sort of the starter for 10 really, Doug. I mean, what's the latest situation in the city and around, with COVID? How are infection rates? And I suppose also give us a little flavour of what the council's been doing to support businesses in the past few months, and also what tools do you still have at your disposal now that a lot of the various government schemes are starting to wind down?
Great. So I think there's three questions there. Morning, by the way, Paul. Morning, everyone else. The latest situation with COVID, the infection rates remain low in Lichfield and the Lichfield District, and predominantly, or mostly throughout Staffordshire, they remain fairly low. There's pockets of outbreaks, but they are fairly localised. And despite being on the border of Birmingham, which I think has got a slightly greater challenge than we do, things are staying low and people are doing their bit. So, of course, which we're very grateful for. Flavour of what the council's been up to and what tools it has at its disposal. I'll probably roll those into one, if I may, Paul. So, first of all, it's been an incredibly challenging 6 months. I think the rule book was torn up, thrown out the window back in March, and we entered into a period where we didn't really know what to do all the time. The rules were changing. We had to carve out our own path. We distributed the grant money clearly that the government gave to us to distribute through businesses. So we put out something like £20 million to local businesses throughout Lichfield District, most of which had to be done manually, which is a tremendous challenge for our staff, but that was great. But we didn't really have many options at the time. It was, here's what government have asked you to do. Now get that out and distribute it. Now, as we're emerging out of lockdown and back to normality, a lot more options are opening up to us about which direction we want to travel in. And I should probably preface these comments with saying that I don't believe a council generates wealth, but what we do is what we can do through our policy decisions is create the right environment so that the economy can thrive. And the guys on this call, you guys are the ones that generate the wealth. We just try and make the best possible environment for that to happen.
Which is why the partnerships are so important, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. So we've got some short-term plans, some medium-term plans, some long-term plans, as you'd expect. So short-term, it's all about getting the economy moving in a COVID-secure way. So we've had a number of teams across the council responding to the relaxation of the lockdown measures. We've had information officers recruited. So many of you would have met Taz, and Sophie, as they've gone out and met businesses in Lichfield District, really acting as a sort of a conduit of information. I know, government will make an announcement, but I'll hear about it as leader of a local authority on the BBC News at 6 o'clock. so for businesses, trying to make sure that conduit of information there has been really key for us, which is why we've invested in that. We've also run several messaging campaigns across the district as well, and provided specific support to businesses. So that's kind of our short-term challenges. Medium term, it's all about our planning, our strategy. So we've got a recovery plan in place, which looks at the impact of COVID-19 on business, the district, residents, etc., and provides a real mixture of sort of support as well as direct interventions. We've got a tourism drive, so we've worked really closely through the Lichfield Place Board. We're starting up the Visit Lichfield card, which comes out, I think, end of this month, beginning next, to really encourage people to spend money locally. We've got the Lichfield City Centre Master Plan, which is, whilst the previous plan was all about creating a shopping centre, I'm much more focused that this is about how do we make visiting Lichfield a great experience, not only for our visitors, but for our residents and our businesses as well. Then longer term, that's really about horizon scanning, looking at what opportunities are out there for us. So I think places like Lichfield, and Daniel touched on this on his bit, I'm sure, but I think we've got some great opportunities coming up. We've got a really vibrant housing market. We're seeing an increase in development in the district. We've got our local plan coming through, which looks at where we want to see housing and employment opportunities. And I really do think that with more people working from home, we'll see a lot of offices shifting away from this sort of organisations anchoring all their staff in large office blocks in city centres or large out-of-town business parks. And we'll really see a shift towards more regional hubs in smaller towns and cities like Lichfield, and Danny will comment on Tamworth. But I think that gives us a real opportunity to look at, well, what does that economy look like? Does that then spring a new economy around supporting those organisations that have come out to the regional hubs? So yeah, there's plenty of opportunities long term for us as well.
And Doug, just on that, it's an interesting point, because there's lots and lots of talk around what's the future of work going to look like. Obviously, saying sort of like, big city centres such as Birmingham, people are discussing and debating it now, and like sort of developments such as Snow Hill or 103 Colmore Road, which is sort of going up big giant sort of office block. But and it feels very much like it's hard to look into the crystal ball and know exactly what the future's gonna hold. There's lots of discussions. Are you actually sort of seeing anything tangible yet, or is it just a sense that, as things shift, there's going to be some changes for sure, that actually, cities such as Lichfield, and just where you're based geographically and all that you've got to offer, is really well placed to capture some of what might happen?
Yeah, so we know, in terms, it's probably slightly too early to see some real sort of statistics shooting through the roof, but we know, for instance, that the inquiries for particularly small to medium office space in Lichfield far exceeds what we actually have provided in the district. So we regularly undertake reviews of what floor space is available for various different types of employment in the district. We know that we have an undersupply of that small to medium office space in the district, and I'd imagine that is only going to the undersupply is going to increase, that we've got an undersupply unless we're able to start putting that gap and finding ways to increase that.
And in terms of the sort of the here and now, I mean, what's the situation with retail and hospitality in the city centre? I mean, things like that Eat Out to Help Out seems to have done exactly that and been really well received. But what are businesses in and around the city centre telling you at the moment?
So I've spoken to a couple of different hospitality businesses over the last few days. Yesterday I was out in Lichfield, absolutely heaving, really, really busy, and the restaurants were all absolutely packed with queues coming out, which you would never see on a Monday usually. And I spoke to the manager of one restaurant, and I said, well, does this mean that Thursday, Friday, Saturdays are dead, and you've just shifted it to the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday? And she said, no, absolutely not. She said, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we're getting a different sort of customer, but they're there, and they're there sort of with our restaurant is full all week long. And that's right from sort of restaurants in the middle of Lichfield right through to coffee shops in Birmingham and Lichfield. They're telling the exact same story. So the Eat Out to Help Out schemes help enormously. We're somewhat lucky in Lichfield in some ways that our vacancy rates are historically incredibly low. So both in Burnwood and in Lichfield, we have historically low vacancy rates of units. We haven't seen those shooting up yet, but certainly anecdotally, you walk through Lichfield today and you will see more empty stores than you would have 6 months ago. Absolutely. What I hope is that those become full again very quickly and that there's a minimal turnaround time as different businesses start springing up in their place. But clearly we'll need to watch this space. And so I've just been joined by my dog.
That's all right. No, I saw the door open. I wasn't sure who was sneaking in there. I think in our sort of Zoom and Teams world, I think that's all fair play, isn't it? Really now. And with sort of initiatives such as Eat Out to Help Out, I mean, are you comfortable with the sort of adherence to all of the social distancing guidelines? Does it feel that both the business owners, but also people who are out there spending money are still really mindful of the rules and the messaging?
Yes, so certainly in my experience, yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I think it makes good business sense for businesses as well. They want people to feel safe and secure when they come out to eat, because that's how more business will be generated. So I think every business that I've been to since we've come out of lockdown has been absolutely assiduous on that, and every single one has taken contact details, very clearly explained what the issues are, and made sure that they're safe and secure, which is great. And we've got a team from the council who are going out regularly, visiting people, making sure that they know what the rules are. We've had very, very few complaints as a council about people not complying with the rules as well. So yeah, it's been really, really positive.
Yeah, well, that's
it is Lichfield, of course, Paul. Come on.
I know you're nothing if not compliant, Doug. But it's it does strike me as being so important. And obviously, over time, people can get a bit fatigued with some of the messages, and the more you get out and return to what feels a bit like what we all used to do, it can be tempting, can't it, to relax? I know certainly, you mentioned, Birmingham. I think there's a bit of a hotspot in Stoke, and it's that balancing act, because the virus is still around, and while we all wish it wasn't, it feels that we've got to try to we have to unlock in that very responsible way, so that we don't run any risks. And I know obviously Birmingham was placed on the government's watch list on Friday, and there's lots of ongoing conversations, lots very strong messaging now. Not quite like the Preston don't kill your granny message, but not far off. And I think it's worked a little bit, because we've seen infection rates here drop. But the important matter is that people move around, don't they? We know they move around for work and they move around for leisure, and so we've got to sort of stay absolutely vigilant the whole time, haven't we?
Absolutely, and it's trying to get that right balance between moving people around in a COVID secure way, whilst also ensuring that money moves around to support our economy, and it really is trying to find that right balance. Yeah.
So it's a sort of a positive update, really, then, from Lichfield, which is great to hear. So, Danny, I was going to move over to you, and I know we had a few little audio problems earlier, so I'm hoping that that's all okay, and we can hear you now. But I mean, so give us the sense of what's your take on what's going on in Tamworth, and both with the current situation around, say, infection rates, but also just how businesses are doing right now.
Yeah, good morning, Paul. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Yes, those audio problems are now fixed. Yeah, thanks for that, Paul. And I think Doug stole most of my thunder, to be honest. Very similar story in Tamworth. Yes, infection rates remain low in Tamworth, as Doug rightly says, throughout Staffordshire. The county has been, quite fortunate that infection rates have never been high. Obviously, odd week, you do get a couple of spikes, 6, 7 cases, but at the minute, Tamworth running incredibly low. I think the public in Tamworth have embraced, what happened in lockdown, what happened as we come out of lockdown very, very well. Understood the message, understood what we need to do. economy in Tamworth starting to get going again, but we were listed the 9th at-risk economy in the country for
That was at the start, was it? Yeah.
For recovery, due to the nature of what Tamworth's economy is, which is mostly retail and leisure. Due to the nature of what our economy fundamentally is, we were number 9 in the country for most at risk post-lockdown. But actually, I think we're starting to come through it okay. But I don't think we'll fundamentally understand the effect on local economies until the furlough scheme ends. We've got a suspicion in Tamworth, and I'm sure Doug would agree in Lichfield, that once the furlough scheme ends, a lot of companies will then fold themselves. And that's a risk we've got to keep our eye on and ensure, you know, we're watching for that, and we've got the right protections in place, the right advice in place, not just as a council, but as across a partnership, across a range of public sector. As many people will be aware, obviously already John Lewis has announced it's pulling out of Tamworth, which the council's already involved in, and looking to support those employees where we can. John Lewis has been quite proactive about it as well, and put some money into a local community fund. So you don't want to see them fold, but the way they've gone about it has been quite impressive. We've got a lot going on in Tamworth at the minute, and it's similar to what Doug said. You know, you've got short-term plans, you've got medium-term plans, you've got long-term plans. Short-term is to get the economy going again and support businesses where we can. Our environmental health teams are out and about, advising businesses on how to keep people safe. We've got messages going out ourselves, working in partnership with yourself as a chamber, and really trying to get the local economy functioning again. And I think this is where we are as a society at the minute. There is a balance between keeping people safe and how to get the economy functioning again. And it's about how to keep that balance together.
Yeah.
I think I've answered your 3 questions in there.
No, you have. And I mean, tell us a little bit. I mean, I know I was reading about the Shop Safe initiative, and which I know was I think it was an 8-week scheme, wasn't it, initially, but has actually been very successful. And so you've been able to get some funding support to extend that now into the autumn.
Yeah, it has been. Rob Holder, you know, local guy in Tamworth who's helped us run the scheme, been absolutely superb. A lot of credit goes out to him and the team that has worked with him. And it's really, really worked with businesses and how to get into businesses and show them how you can do this safely, advice on how to approach certain ways of doing things. And stay safe has remained the message. So it's really been quite successful. We've managed to pick up a little bit of government funding to keep it going. So really quite pleased with that.
Yeah, and it feels as well across, you know, sort of both Lichfield and Tamworth, that there's that very strong sense of community, which you're able to pull on to both, you know, encourage people to come and support the local sort of retail hospitality, but also to listen to the messaging. And, you know, I think that's a truism across the country, isn't it? Where sort of, you know, smaller towns and cities are able to maybe manage this better than say some of the bigger cities. For example, sort of, you know, Birmingham and the sort of the whole metropolis, as you like, around here, where it feels like there's all sorts of pockets springing up, and messaging maybe isn't always seen or heard. Does that sort of seem right? But to you?
I can't profess to be a public health expert there, Paul, but yeah, I understand fully what you're saying. It is the bigger cities that seem to have, you know, I think it's more when you pack people on top of each other in large metropolitan areas, there's more of a risk, whereas in the smaller towns and district villages, like we see in Tamworth and Lichfield, it's easier to space out. And not a public health expert, but yeah, the metropolitan areas seem to have suffered it more. And I won't sit here and say they've done anything wrong. I think it's just the nature of what it is.
Yeah. And, you know, you mentioned, Danny, about, you know, sort of longer term plans as well. I mean, things like sort of, is it Gungate precinct and the like, that's still on the sort of the planning board, as it were, and sort of continuing to look to the longer term future?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you know, we've got the Gungate site in Tamworth Town Centre that the council bought in June 2018. We're looking to long-term master plan that site for a town centre development. Also, all kinds of options keep throwing themselves up, and it's quite a bizarre site that every 6 months the goalposts seem to move on what is the right thing to put there.
Right.
You think housing would stack up? Bizarrely, it doesn't.
Yeah.
You think leisure would stack up? Bizarrely, it doesn't. You think retail would stack up? Well, we know that doesn't. But you actually add in a mix of all three, it seems to work long term, you know, as a boost to the town centre, a wonderful piece of regeneration, but also fetching some income back to the council. We've also got, as you know, the Future High Streets funding bit.
Yeah.
Preliminary discussions with the government, they're actually telling us it's one of the best thought out bids in the country. No guarantee we're going to get any money, but one of the best start out lists. Because what Tamworth Council has approached this is along the lines of, we're not trying to solve our own problems. We're trying to solve the town's problems. And the government actually noted in initial feedback, this isn't about bailing out the council. This is about how you get the town centre functioning again, properly like a town centre. So initial feedback's been good. Could be worth up to 41 million of investment into the town centre. So between Gungate and the Future High Streets Fund, I'm hoping and praying that Tamworth Town Centre will be a building site in 2 years, and the regeneration opportunities will be phenomenal.
Yeah, and that all sort of then ripples out, doesn't it, as well, in terms of creating jobs and opportunities. And I suppose that approach very much echoes what Doug was talking about, around it. It's about enabling, isn't it? And the council playing its part in the broader partnership. One thing, you mentioned the sort of the leisure economy, and obviously we saw the news about Drayton Manor changing hands a few weeks ago. I mean, have you sort of had contact with the new owners there, and what their plans are?
Yeah, it's quite a bizarre one, actually. People think Drayton Manor's in Tamworth. It's actually in Lichfield.
Is it?
I think Lichfield will have had more conversations with Drayton Manor.
Give me that question.
That's on me, because I go all the time, and I always sort of associate it with popping into Tamworth for some lunch afterwards, maybe.
Well, this is a perfect example of why me and Doug are on this call. The Tamworth and Lichfield economy is one economy in reality, and it's why Tamworth and Lichfield are in absolute partnership when it comes to economic development. We're aware of the takeover of Drayton Manor, and it is wonderful news for the residents of Tamworth, because it is actually one of the biggest employers in Tamworth. Yeah. It is slightly over the border for us into Fazeley, which is part of Lichfield District Council.
Right.
But, forget political borders. Political borders mean nothing in the real world. It's a big employer for the people of Tamworth. So, yeah, we're pleased with the news. But all the business rates go to Lichfield District Council, so it's a question for Doug, really.
There you go. I've been schooled there in my local geography. I should know better, being a local resident, shouldn't I? But yeah, I mean, Doug, I guess it's such a... And there's many different anchor institutions. I know, say, like the Garrick, of course, in the Cathedral and the like. But... something like Drayton Manor, which pulls in so much sort of external visitors and money into the region, provides so much employment. It felt like, while sad in a way that Bryant family have had to hand over control, but actually positive that the park's been saved and the new owners seem to have some exciting plans.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I think the fact that the employees all stayed on the same terms is a huge boost for them, and I think a real sort of signal of intent from the new owners that not only will they protect what was there before, but they will continue to build on that and improve that. So yeah, we've got really close links with Drayton Manor as a council. The Lichfield Place Board, which I referenced earlier on, they have a seat at the table at that board. Along with organisations like Garrick, the National Memorial Arboretum, etc. So we really do try and bring lots of organisations together, such as Drayton Manor, to think about the longer term improvements that we can make to help them, and that they can help other organisations as well. So we really build that sort of economy around us.
Just got a question for both of you, just on sort of national government support, which it's definitely been unprecedented. You hear that word a lot right now, don't you? And things like the furlough scheme, the job retention scheme, has undoubtedly done what it said on the tin, and has kept an awful lot of people in employment to date. But we know that it started to taper off, and by the end of October, it's going to cease. Had the sort of the business grants, the small business grants, which were pushed out through local authorities, and some additional discretionary grants. But are you picking up any sense of additional support down the line? I know that the word from sort of central government is that's it. But what are you sort of hearing on the ground? And also, do you think there are particular needs that certain businesses or certain sectors are still going to have beyond October? And you mentioned, Danny, that sort of keeping the eye on when furlough ends, what's going to happen? Is that a bit of a cliff edge? And I suppose just to sort of set that into context, we're doing a lot of lobbying sort of really around maybe sort of additional sector specific support, arts and culture, and sort of those industries who cannot go back and operate right now need some help, and a lot of business owners have said to us around, they just want a sense of fairness. Fine, they just want to be able to open and have a chance to sort of trade their way through this. But if you can't do that, then you're going to need some additional support, or else the future's pretty sort of grim. But just sort of give us your sort of take on that situation, and what I guess locally you may be able to do, which I know your hands can be tied in many ways.
I think if I can say that first, and I think the point you make about having a sector-specific response is exactly what's needed. I think the government have, what they've done so far in their grant scheme is take a blanket approach, which to be fair, to get the money out quickly and get it done is probably the only realistic approach they could have taken to get the cash out. But we know that there are winners and losers in that. There have been people who really need it but haven't been able to access it. And there have been businesses that actually have seen an uptick in their trade over the last 3 or 4 months, but have still had sort of the handouts from government. So they've kind of got a double whammy. I think the real question now for government is, how do we get down to the granular detail so that we're actually able to start doing a sector-specific response and really target? And that fairness doesn't mean doing the same thing for everyone, does it? And it's really about getting down to that level of how do we help each specific sector. And I think the way in which the councils can help is really, again, being that conduit of information, pulling together at a sort of a sub-regional level the data to ensure that gets through to government, and then taking that information once it comes down and making sure it gets into each of those businesses. It was amazing as a sort of a local councillor, the amount of businesses that I met that weren't fully aware of the terms of the grants. They thought it was a loan. They thought they could only have it if they had an office somewhere. And they're actually that busy running the business, but they didn't think about the 10 grand that was on the table somewhere for them. So I think it's really kind of joined the dots on that.
Danny, anything from yourself over and above?
I think, would echo a lot of what Doug said. I think a lot of businesses didn't understand a lot of how the schemes worked at the beginning. The one caveat I'd add is I think this is a failing we sometimes have in Britain. It's been a historic failing for 30, 40 years from what I can see. Is obviously the original grant scheme came in, the business grants, you could have 10,000 or 25,000 depending on the size of your business. Then obviously another follow-up grant. Obviously then the discretionary grants, Tamworth got around £700,000, £5,000 per business, but you couldn't have previously had a grant. So all of a sudden we hit a point of we ran out of businesses to give money to. Because the government keep setting these rules on a national formula, on a national thing. I think they missed a trick. If they'd actually given councils more discretion to use the money locally, as Doug said, even sector specific, we could have actually, I think, helped more business. Nobody understands the local economy like the local. If you'd actually given councils a little bit more local discretion to understand how their own local economy functions.
I totally agree. It was a bit of a misnomer, really, wasn't it? The discretionary grant, because it wasn't actually that discretionary with the rules. And
we struggled to give it away, genuinely struggled to give the last grant away because everybody's already qualified under everything else. We've got about 500,000 left. We're struggling to give away.
And, in a sort of situation like this, it's just madness, isn't it? And I know there's lots of conversations and sort of lobbying behind the scenes around, it's about getting the money out quickly to those who need it. And yes, you've got to have checks and balances because it's public money and we all sort of understand that. But at the same time, it's crazy when you've got cash which is meant for businesses being sat in bank accounts and not getting out. And it's that sort of translating, isn't it, or linking up and making people aware that you are eligible and actually don't get bamboozled by the sort of the lingo that gets attached with this. But and again, I suppose that's another area where something like the Chamber, we try to work in partnership with you and use our channels to get to businesses and kind of do that tap on the shoulder. You need to look at this because it isn't as complicated as you might think, and you're probably eligible. And if you are, why not sort of access that? So we've got a few questions coming into the chat. So I'll let's see what we've got in here. So Jason Challoner's asked a good question here. I mean, how difficult is it to convert vacant retail and large office space to change of use for housing, and sort of makes the point that if young professionals are attracted into, say, Lichfield or Tamworth town centres, and I guess we've got sort of space where they can actually live, then that's going to help local SME businesses and certainly probably that sense of independent retailers as well, I'd imagine. Either of you want to sort of take that one first?
Yeah, happy to jump in if Doug's okay with that.
Go for it.
I think it's a very, very good question. And as town centres certainly begin to evolve, we've got to really think about this question. We've long understood in Tamworth that if we want our town centre to become incredibly viable again, you've got to recreate a sense of community in that town centre. A perfect example, we've been discussing for a couple of years of how to achieve something. If you look right on the edges of our town centre, where there's some old townhouses, 3-storey townhouses, you've got doctors' surgeries in there, you've got dentists in there, you've got solicitors' firms in there. How do we encourage those businesses now to go take up the retail units in the exact centre of the town centre rather than on the outskirts, and actually return these into housing, into accommodation, into student housing, whatever we need to do, and actually recreate a sense of town centre community? And if you rebuild a sense of town centre community, these are the people that will demand bistros, will demand jazz clubs, etc., etc. And form follows function as you recreate. So it's a good question. I would have said 10 years ago it was incredibly difficult to do. Planning law is evolving, planning law is changing, and certainly what the government are discussing at the minute, I think it will become easier and easier to achieve exactly what's being asked there. So watch this space is my honest answer. Property, but that's a side matter. My opinion of HS2 has been documented for a good 8 years now. It's in council documents dating back to 2012. We need to get on with HS2, but not just HS2. We need to get on with a lot of infrastructure projects around the wider West Midlands and certainly nationally in Britain. I came across a very sad statistic quite a few years ago. Between the years 2000 and 2015, in France, 620 miles of motorway were built. In Germany, 840 miles of motorway were built. In Britain, 21 miles in 15 years of new motorway.
Yeah.
We don't invest in infrastructure in Britain anymore. We don't know how to do it anymore. And we don't just need HS2, we need a whole raft of projects that really drive the economy. And they do create wealth, they do create jobs, and they create skills that are long-term beneficial to the economy. So, yeah, we are massively pro-HS2 in Tamworth.
Thanks, Danny. And I will let Doug come in as well, but that's a great stat around motorway. Same with railways, really, isn't it? And I must admit, I find it slightly baffling our resistance to investing in new infrastructure when it's the I can understand on the sort of localized level where there may be impact, but fundamentally when you take that helicopter view and what is going on all over the world, you've got to sort of keep up with the Joneses. That's what the 19th century and the likes, that's what sort of made this country great, didn't it? But there seems to be a real aversion.
We meant business as a country, and we've got to be like that again.
Yeah. HS2, Doug. And I mean, actually, I must say, Robert Elliott's made a great point in here just around how, say, residents in Solihull really feel sort of a part of it, and I guess that sort of advocacy or affinity with HS2, and I mean, just give us your sort of sense of the view right now, and I guess we know some of the historical sort of challenges.
Yeah, so I think if we park the historical challenges for a second, because as Danny says, I think you accept that it's going to be built, and then you need to embrace the opportunities that are going to come from it. So I think directly in response to the point about feeling some sort of affinity with the line, I think in Solihull, an area which I know very well where I grew up, you've got the interchange there. You've got that sort of sense of anchoring at least within the borough, if not within the town, and that there is a sense that it comes to or leaves from Solihull, and there's something to anchor from. I think certainly in Lichfield that's slightly more difficult in that it. I won't use emotive language here, but it passes through the district without stopping, shall we say. However, and I think we're slightly behind, and that's our own fault because we fought against it for so long and we're so bluntly antagonistic towards HS2 as a sort of a council and as councillors representing a lot of the residents who didn't want it. We're probably now a step and a half behind. in that we need to warm those relationships back up again. And so I've certainly reached out to various people from HS2 to start having those conversations. But absolutely, there are lots of employment opportunities that will be available in Lichfield. And there's also a hell of a lot of grant money that's still on the table that Staffordshire particularly has been terrible at applying for. So we've got, in fact, I think Sophie's on this call, we've employed an officer at the council to start looking at how do we get those bids in to the people like HS2, to other relevant organisations, to make sure, as an authority, we're not leaving any cash on the table that could be ours to invest into Lichfield.
And that's good ways to actually start to create that sense of affinity, isn't it? And,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's why the money's there. James has popped a great question in here and talking about how the economies of Lichfield and Tamworth are hugely interlinked, and a question, I guess, around your views on the future of local government, potential sort of reorganisations. I know there's lots of discussions going on around LEPs and the like as well. But what's your views on how this could be set up to best benefit the local economy? And as James mentioned, that the government has signalled its desire to see unitary councils coming to existence as well.
So if I go first on this, I am firmly of the view that we ought to take whatever form of local government best serves the residents and the economy in our areas. What I don't want is empire building by councillors who want to retain their own council, whether that's the county or district, or we absolutely ought to be laser focused on what is the best form of local government for our economy and residents. Once we can start answering that question, then we will relentlessly pursue that. And if that means that I'm out of a job as a councillor or whatever, well, so be it. This is not the time to worry about our own little sort of empires in parts of the world. My personal view is that Tamworth and Lichfield are interlinked, and if we were further interlinked, I don't think that would cause anyone any harm.
Good answer, Doug. You stolen your thunder, Danny?
No, Doug will recall we had a conversation about this about 3 weeks ago on the phone, and we both said if this is the way the world's got to be, we're both conservatives, we believe in smaller governments. If this is the way the world's got to be, we're better off embracing it and making the best of it. As we've consistently said, for all intents and purposes, Tamworth and Lichfield are very similar places, very close economically. This is where the world's going. We've got to embrace it and make the best of it. I mean, I've unfortunately been a councillor long enough to know the complication is here. I remember the 2005 consultation where there was initial conversations around what we call at the time the BLT, Burton, Lichfield, Tamworth. We nicknamed it the BLT. And literally it was almost full steam ahead. John Prescott was leading the project nationally. When the rumour goes that Gordon Brown walked into his office one morning and said, "That's great, but who's paying for it?" And there becomes the complication of local government reorganisation. It took somewhere in the region of £100 million to reorganise Cornwall 10 years ago from 6 district councils and 1 county council. What you're talking in Staffordshire is a county council, a city council in Stoke, and then 8 district councils. And I will come back until somebody shows me who's paying for it. I don't know how this is done, because you're talking about a lot of staff will need to be made redundant. You're talking about a lot of reorganisation of assets, of contracts, of everything that's involved. And, to go full steam ahead and say in 2 years' time we want, I don't see how it's done. Longer term, it may be the answer. I just want someone to explain who's paying for it at the minute.
Well, I think that's a very practical insight, Danny. But also, I think fair play for the sort of taking that very grown-up approach. It's around what's best, isn't it, for the citizens and for the areas. And I think sometimes you can get. I mean, we recognise that sort of boundaries and all that are important, but you can get too hung up on it. And I mean, we always say that in the Chamber of Business doesn't really do boundaries. It doesn't. People want to buy and sell and visit and travel and kind of we'll pay some attention, but it's very difficult when you get too fixated on that. Just going to rattle through a couple of final questions. Anne's popped one in here just around what's being done in your areas to promote cycling and walking? And I guess that's off the back of, obviously more people working from home. There's going to be additional sort of flexible working, sort of sense of initiatives that you've got going on around sort of healthier ways of just getting more active.
So I'll pick up on that. So cycling, we work with the county council, who it's always the favourite one of a district council, isn't it? Oh, it's the county council. But it is the county council that predominantly leads on that. So we're looking at ways that we can lobby them on particularly cycleways around Lichfield, and we're making it more of a hub. We're also looking at a project to open up the disused railway line between Lichfield and Birmingham, again, which provides a much safer route of travel between Birmingham and Lichfield by walking or by bike. What was the other part of that question? Was it really just around active travel and getting people out of the cars and walking and cycling?
Yeah.
So it's firmly on our radar. It's really about how we work with county council responsible for highways to make our dreams come to fruition with their money, is the reality.
Thanks.
From a Tamworth perspective, we found ourselves in quite a lucky position here that actually, the cabinet member in Tamworth for, growth and regeneration is also a county councillor. So we managed to get a very early link into this agenda when government released money for cycling.
Yeah.
We've already got works begun in our town centre for new cycle lanes around our town centre. And also we're looking, and we're confident we'll get this investment to connect Coaton Green, which will be the last piece of Tamworth in reality, that is not connected by some sort of cycle route. Tamworth has some phenomenal cycle routes. In fact, I think it's got some of the best cycle routes in Staffordshire. Because of the way Tamworth's grown since the 1960s, there's always been the opportunity to put things in as you've grown. So yeah, we've already got fantastic cycleways, but the opportunity to connect up the last few bits has been phenomenal. And because we've got that little bit of a head start, the funding's already arrived and the works are already beginning.
Great, no, thank you. And just going to sort of come back to a couple of questions. And James popped another one in just around the opportunity to develop more sort of small serviced office space in Tamworth and Lichfield as companies look to downsize, and just that needs to be encouraged. And I know, from experience that that's certainly been a bit of a focus, hasn't it? And we've had meetings over in Tamworth in that sort of very much that space itself, Danny. But any other sort of thoughts? Does that sort of fit into the future master planning? And you sort of mentioned around mixed use. Is that sort of more flexible office space going to be a staple of the future?
I'll go back to Doug's earlier point. COVID-19 has changed everything. We've been saying for a few years in Tamworth, yes, if you are a one-man business or five-man business, five-person business, we can find you up space. If you want a massive office block, we can deal with you. What we've struggled historically in Tamworth is that middle step. So how you go from 5 to 20 employees before you go to 50 to 100. We've struggled for the middle. But I think COVID-19 has changed everything. And the reason I say that is when lockdown began, we sent 350 staff home and said, you now work from home. Within 2 days, everybody's benefits were paid. Litter was picked up. Dustbins were emptied. Everything happened that is supposed to happen without the need for a massive building. Tamworth Borough Council, Lichfield District Council, cannot be the only two in the world are realising this. Why would you want to pay big rents and big business rates when actually we've got the technology now for people to work from home? So I think the danger of the question is, will office blocks be needed at all longer term? And I've got a real concern about how local government will be funded long term as business rates drop off a cliff because people no longer rent buildings. It's an interesting question.
It's back to that crystal ball, isn't it? And it strikes me that sort of certainly we've all proven we can work from home, and it's just how flexible that then becomes, isn't it? And kind of people will be blending and mixing, because there's still a lot of value, I think, from working together and being in spaces and being able to sort of see your physically see your co-workers and go and grab a sandwich together. But you weigh that up with do you need as much square footage as you got right now? And I think
I think that's exactly it. And it's the opportunity as I see it, and Danny's got the same opportunity in Tamworth as we do in Lichfield, which is how do you get that right blend of businesses, our traditional retail business, small to medium office space, and then sort of gentle density housing in your town centres, so that you start creating that community where people can work, they've got leisure time, they can live, and I really think that's where a lot of the opportunities lie for us.
Yeah, no, great. Well, I'm going to wrap up now just with the final comment that Anne Schwarzenbach has made, and she sort of says here she owns an office building in Lichfield, and how does she get involved in discussions around long-term plans for Lichfield? But I guess, you know, for both of you, it's just that last way to sort of say, you know, businesses who are either on today or watching the recording, they want to reach out, they want to get involved, they want to play a part. How can they best do that? So Doug, do you want to lead on that?
Initially, drop me an email, doug.pullen@lichfielddc.gov.uk. We run regular consultations, and we have various forums where we get involved with businesses. We have officers, economic development officers, who regularly speak to businesses throughout the district. So it's not just a series of events, it really is an ongoing conversation. So, you know, we're always more than happy to speak to businesses about what they need and how they want to feed into that.
Yeah.
Yeah, would echo that. Any business in Tamworth and Lichfield, contact Doug. Fully comfortable. No, in all seriousness, you may recall in 2019 I fronted a social media campaign in Tamworth called Tamworth What's Next, and it was how we communicate with businesses in Tamworth about what the next 10 to 15 to 20 years look like. That project has not gone away. Any business that wants to speak to Tamworth Borough Council or speak to any councillor, please engage. We want to hear your thoughts and your feedback on where we can help, where we can. Yeah. Tamworth Borough Council doesn't want to be responsible for designing an economy that doesn't work for business. It has to be the other way around. As Doug said earlier in one of his answers, it's our job to enable and create the culture that matters. So please speak to your local councillors, speak to the council, let us know your thoughts, your feelings. We can then start designing that, you know, those conditions that create a culture that will work for everyone. Yeah, no, I totally echo that. It's all about partnership, and I think, you know, Doug, Danny, you know, lead by example. You've got great economic development teams. You know, from our side, you know, the Chambers of Commerce, it's you know, a pleasure working with both, actually, because of the open-mindedness, and, you know, it is around sort of linking up, and certainly, Anne, you know, we can help as well with that. Then, you know, that's what we're here to do as a chamber. But yeah, no, thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Danny and Doug, as well, for the sort of the candid updates, for the positivity as well. I thought, you know, it's rooted in reality, which is encouraging, isn't it, at this time? And you know, the way that you're leading and managing sort of through what has been a pretty awful and challenging situation, but, you know, we're not through it yet, but got to keep on going. As I look out my window, the rain has stopped, and there may even be a little bit of blue sky sort of trying to sneak through the cloud cover. So let's take that as a metaphor, hopefully, for what's going to be happening for the country. But thanks everyone for joining, and I hope you all have a really good rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Cheers.